Welcome to another episode of the Arena Craft Podcast, a show dedicated exclusively to Magic the Gathering, Arena, and no other erroneous platforms. My name is Arjuna. I'm one of your hosts. The other host, the charitable, the wonderful, the competitive, the always on point, Covertgoblue. How are you doing today, my friend?
Oh, man. I have recovered nicely from a thorough shellacking of my pride and my magical abilities. But I took it out on ladder. We'll get to that later. But I, of course, am alluding to our Showdown as we tried to get a show. We tried to educate each other, right, for a show for 2021 Standard and what was good in that format. And you should tell people. You're going to be way more enthused about this than I will. You should tell the story.
Okay, so I'll get into that in a moment. So yeah, the quick overview exactly is today we're going to be talking about the Standard 2021 format, which is basically kind of the post-rotation peak that we're getting on Arena. You can actually play it in the ranked ladder in both best of 1 and best of 3. So we were excited about this format, and we decided to do some testing for the week and have a showdown this Thursday, which also happened to be the featured Arena Craft, sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, featured day. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is that format, and hopefully it'll give us a peer around the corner to have an idea of which of the existing cards and archetypes might be good with the release of the Zendikar set. So nothing that we're doing here right now is ultimately going to matter if Zendikar upsets everything, but there's a good chance, especially with the power level of the sets that we currently have access to in Arena, there's a good chance that some of this will actually matter for the next format. So that's kind of what we're excited to figure out here. So yeah, let's talk about this event, because this was the crux of what we spent our time doing, was that we organized this head-to-head where we were going to play. We had a little misunderstanding about it, but we ended up playing 4 decks against each other, and we brought 5 decks to the table, and we each got to select 1 deck from the opponent that they would not get to play. And it's funny, actually, because at the start of this event, or maybe like in one of the first games, I remember someone came into your chat, CGB, and they were like, "Are you bullying Arjuna again?" And to be honest, I think like everything about this event was 100% Arjuna bullying CGB.
What? I've never been bullied in my life. No one could bully me.
I think I was definitely playing the role of the villain in this event. So basically, this is how it panned out. As we were both listing off the decks that we were going to be bringing to the event, right? And somehow I managed to not only bring 2 Adventures decks to this particular event, but I also somehow managed to convince CGB to let me play both of them.
By whining, to be clear.
I was really excited about Adventure in this format, and I really wanted to play it in the event. And we had this thing where we both voted out Teamer Adventure from each other's list, because we both just knew it was the best deck in the format. And I petitioned CGB. I was like, hey, why don't we both play Teamer Adventure? Because it's clearly an important deck in the format. I kind of want to showcase it. I kind of want people to see the deck in action in this format. And CGB was like, nah, I'm not into it. All right, you can play it if you want, but I'm not going to play it. And I was like, okay, you sure? Because it's the best deck. And he was like, nah, I'm good, we're good. All right, so why don't we just go down the list real quick, CGB, and say what we brought to the event. So my deck lists were, I brought Mono White Lifegain, I brought Teamer Adventure, Simic Adventure, Simic Epiphany, which is kind of like Gargaroth Epiphany, and Boros Cycling to the table. So what did you bring, CGB?
No comment.
No comment? Just forget those decks ever happened.
Just forget them all. No. Let's see. What did I play? Now, okay. I had Teamer Adventures, which got banned. I banned Boros Cycling for you after your complaining. And then I also brought Blue-White Control. I also brought Mono-Blue Devotion. I also brought Simic. What would you call this? Troll Reanimator?
Yes.
Simic Food,
Simic Troll
I guess.
King. Yep.
And I brought Is It Prowess.
Okay. So I have to say, CGB kind of handicapped himself right from the beginning of this event by A, bringing in Prowess and choosing to play it first, and also letting me play Teamer Adventure. So he started down, I would say. Started down in the race. And basically, we played through this series. I ended up prevailing, and in a controversial kind of final game when I was playing Simic Adventure, I went into the sideboard with my Fae of Wishes, and I wished up for both a mountain and an escape to the wilds for a surprise mid-game transformational sideboard strategy. And I escaped to the wilds, and all hell broke loose on Twitch. I ended up prevailing that game and taking down the series, but it was quite an adventure. And if you guys want to watch either side of that drama, you can go into the VODs on Twitch and just see how it all went down. But yeah, basically there were some people who were saying that I was cheating or kind of violating the spirit of the event, essentially bringing two of the same deck to the event. And I'll let the audience decide one way or the other. But it was a fun series, so if you want to see these decks in action, that's a great way to go and see it there.
If you want. I mean, you don't have to. You can take my word for it that I was destroyed.
So I did prevail. Let's talk about the decks that we brought and what we thought was cool. So both of us coming into this event were like extremely clear that Adventures was like probably the strongest mechanic in the format, and that Teamer Adventure was probably the strongest deck to be playing. I don't know, like, do you have any comments on that, CGB? Any exposition as to why that is?
I felt the same way. Why that is because it's already a very proven deck in a broken standard format. Over the last several months, it's been it's been a great deck in a very strong format, a format that did include cards that have since been banned. And it doesn't really change much other than the sideboard, I would say, and a little less consistency in the mana base, which if we wanted to deep dive on that, it was workable. It was working. It was very workable, the mana base. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I also felt just like Teamer Adventures was an S tier deck, and anything that you wanted to do had to beat it. And we talked about it on one of my streams during the week as I was preparing for the format. When you put a bunch of the best cards in the format on a page and you look at them together, it's like, okay, great henge, but you have to have a creature of a certain power. You have to invest in that creature. It has to live, and then you play the henge, and then you play other things, and then it's good. Winota, you have to play a certain number of non-human creatures and also have these human creatures in your deck, and then you play it, and then it's good. Embercleave, you have to have this many creatures. One should probably have a power greater than one to be effective, and then it's also good. Like, there was all this conditional, right? Conditional. Or you can play a 1-mana 1/1 and just start drawing 2 cards a turn for the rest of the game. Or you can play a 2-mana artifact that's almost impossible to remove in this darn format and start getting double your spells for the rest of the game. Like, they're cheap and they have no cost almost. It's almost a joke to try to play engines and go over the top of them because they're so cheap. They're so cheap. They're doing busted stuff way before you can even start to think about yours. I think that's most of it. Now, I will say this. I no longer think Teamer Adventures is the best deck in the format.
Oh, okay. Upset. That'll be an interesting thing for us to dive into, for sure.
We can come back to it. But how about you? Is that what you felt going in? Was it that clear to you?
Yeah, okay. The reason I brought Simic Adventure to the event is that when I was first looking at this format, I was like, I just don't know if you can play a 3-color deck in this format. And it's just all about the mana, right? Because we only have basically tap lands, triomes, and fabled passages. And Temur, one of the issues as well with Temur Adventure specifically is that to support your Beanstalk Giants, you need to run a lot of basics. Like you need to run like 12 to 15 basics in your deck. And so what you end up with is a mana base that looks really terrible on paper. You know, you're running like 4 triomes, maybe 4 fabled passages, some temples, and then like 12 to 15 basics. Like that's not a tournament ready mana base by any means. And to combat that, I actually, in my flex slots, I ran 2 copies of Adventurous Impulse because I was just anticipating that I might need to spend one of my early turns setting up my mana. So my first crack at it was I was like, let's try Simic Adventure because this had been a deck which it had never been tier 1, but it had kind of done some work in the previous formats. And the deck's plan was to do kind of half of the Temur Adventure thing. And the other half was basically like Turbo Oro, where you're using Merfolk Secret Keeper to just mill yourself, which either finds you your Oros or gets you your Oros back from the graveyard. Oro was a card which never really worked in the Temur Adventure shell, and one of the main reasons for that was just that your cards don't end up in the graveyard. The first however many spells that you cast in the game, none of them go to the graveyard. And so, I don't know, it's like by the mid-game when you'd ideally be turning Oro on, you just don't have that gas there. So it's really not it doesn't fit well with the theme of the deck.
Yeah, it's a 3-mana play, right? And sometimes you gain you always gain 3 life. Sometimes you ramp, sometimes you don't, and you draw a card, but you're down board presence. And the Temur Adventure deck never needs a 3-mana play. Like, it's got tons of them,
Absolutely. It's like you go down the list, and basically all of your adventure creatures, or at least all of the ones that you want to be playing in those turns, are all 3 mana. So, yeah, and the deck, it just doesn't need help with the ramp. It just doesn't need it. Frankly, Oro is just not a fit for the deck. So, but in the Simic deck, it made a lot more sense. And it was also just, when I was looking down the list of powerful cards in the format, and Oro kind of is at the top, in my opinion. Like, I think just on raw power level, if you look at the cards in this format, nothing touches Oro as far as like 1-card powerhouse kind of power level. And that deck's fine. It's fine. I think you can run it on the ladder. I think you could hit Mythic. I think you could do work with it, etc. But then I just was like, well, let's try this Temur list. And it turns out that the mana wasn't terrible. And just having access to Escape to the Wilds and Bone Crusher Giant and all that kind of stuff is just so powerful. Like you said, it's a proven deck. It's a powerful deck. I think that our game 1 really illustrated why this deck is so good. And admittedly, you had a terrible draw that game.
It was unacceptable. It was a mulligan into a nothing. The goldfish is very strong, we could say.
The goldfish is strong. But here's the thing. My draw was a fairly mediocre draw in that deck as well. I had neither. So usually in Temur Adventure, you want to mulligan a hand which doesn't have one of your 2 power cards, which is the Innkeeper or the Clover. But I was looking at my hand. I had all of my mana. I had like 3 adventure creatures, something like that. And I was just like, let's send. And the thing is, the fail state on this deck is so good. The fail state is you play like Bone Crusher into Resolve Bone Crusher into Bounce your thing with Fae, and it was just like every turn of the game, I was making meaningful plays and doing stuff, and I was just playing my adventure creatures, and that was it. And it was like in the final turns of the game, I drew Edgewall Innkeeper or whatever.
I was trying to figure out how to cast a Stormwing Entity. Surprise, surprise.
But at every point in that game, I was able to interact favorably while not doing anything busted. And it's just because you go down the list, you're like Brazen Borrower, Lovestruck Beast, Bone Crusher Giant, Fae of Wishes. These are just good cards. These are just some of the best cards in the format. Like a 1/4 flying blocker for 2 mana is a really good card. Anyway, I think that this list is really strong. I just don't see anything else in the format personally which can compete with that kind of cheap enablers, easy mid-game relevant plays with your adventure creatures, powerful ramp package, wishboard, finishing. The deck has everything, in my opinion.
All right. I'm going to leap a little bit ahead of where I thought I'd talk about this, but it seems perfect for right here, because I said that I don't think Temur Adventures is the best deck in the format anymore. And the deck that I think is the best deck in the format is Simic Adventures.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Interesting. Okay, so... Yeah. And when you say Simic Adventure, are you talking about a list similar to the one that I played, or are you talking about a different take on it?
I never saw your deck list.
Okay.
I think it would be very similar. I can read you what I played. Spoiler, no mountain in the sideboard.
No mountain in the sideboard?
Because I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't lie to our viewers.
How can you even call it Simic Adventure if you're not running a mountain in the sideboard, CGB?
All right. I'll just run the list down, because it's going to be easy. It's like all 4 of us until we get to the sideboard. 4 Merfolk Secret Keeper. And this, to me, is a perfect place to start, because I think Merfolk Secret Keeper is the secret weapon.
Okay.
Because Merfolk Secret Keeper, instead of Bone Crusher Giant, has 3 huge applications. Application number 1, better mana, like you said. The mana in Temur Adventures is workable, but it's not great. It's a little bit better if you can stick to 2 colors. Application number 2, you get to play Uro and actually bring back Uro, which gives you 3 busted cards to put in your deck. Innkeeper, Clover, Uro. All right, you're playing 4 more busted cards than the other Temur deck. All right, and then number 3, it's your win con. They don't know it until it hits them,
yes.
But it's their win con.
Yes, until you mill them for 12, 16, 20, and they're just dead.
So, yeah, they can't really, nobody can keep your Clovers off the battlefield. And we'll get to the sideboard, but it's got once in future to get them back if they do get destroyed. So if you get to a game state where you've seen most of your deck and you have 3 Clovers in play and you have a Merfolk Secret Keeper in your hand and another on the battlefield and you get an unsummon out of your sideboard and you mill your Temur opponent, there's nothing they can do. They have to keep up with you. They have to be drawing cards all game with their innkeepers, because you're doing the same thing. You're both doing the dance. They're trying to get to a beanstalk giant kind of fling finish. You can get to milling out their deck before they get to that very consistently.
Especially because they draw a lot of cards and they play Escape to the Wilds and stuff. I definitely had this happen on the ladder playing Simic Adventure, where Temur Adventure was just I'm crushing it. Look at my board state. Look at all of these cards I've drawn, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oops, you're milled and you're dead.
Oh, yeah. When they play the Great Henge, I'm just yes.
Yes, keep it going.
Let's go. I get them into this position. I don't even always mill them out. I'll mill them down to 4. And now it's what are you going to do? You can't cast an adventure creature. You're going to deck yourself because you have 3 innkeepers in play. You can't play any creature. You have Great Henge in play. It's just, they're done. Because there's no reshuffle effect anymore. They can't fetch Jace. They can't fetch Clear the Mind. They can't fix their deck.
No, and Thassa's Oracle is a creature, so they can't wish for it out of the sideboard.
Exactly. So that the Merfolk Secret Keeper is a secret weapon. The rest of the deck is pretty straightforward. 4 Edgewall Innkeeper. Don't need to mention why. 4 Fae of Wishes. You get it. 4 Lucky Clover. Yep. 4 Brazen Borrower. I think Brazen Borrower is one of the best cards in the format.
The sauce.
Oh my goodness.
It's so good.
4 Lovestruck Beast to make sure that aggro decks are a complete joke in this format. 4 Beanstalk Giants, the ramp machine. 1 Great Henge. 4 Uros. And then I have 27 land, and 3 of them are Radiant Fountains, because the only thing I found that I needed was more time.
Wow, lifegain.
Now, I want to know your opinion of the sideboard choices. Tormod's Crypt. This is for the Flare. This is for the Zenith Flare, basically, but sometimes Uro. Pretty straightforward.
I just want to note one thing. The important thing about Crypt is that you can wish for it with 4 mana and play it immediately and have it down. That's why Crypt.
100%. 1 miscast.
Oh, spicy.
The rest of the sideboard, once you hear it, you're going to sometimes need to protect it because you're tapping out for some very ambitious plans. 1 unsummon. This ends up both keeping you alive and being a kill condition for getting back your Secret Keeper to use it again, as oftentimes you need 2 Secret Keepers to finish the job. 1 Mystic Repeal for Annex mostly. Doom Foretold. I've been running into that a lot too. 1 Shadow Spear. And I'm going to name 3 cards. I basically built my own fling in Simic. Shadow Spear, Ram
through, yep.
Primal Might.
I love it. So this was one of my main issues that I was like, how do you get the fling combo in this deck? Because it really is an important alternate win con. Like sometimes you're looking at the board state and the only way you're going to win is by flinging your opponent out, right? So I ran into this as well. And I love that you and I both reached the same conclusion, which is, wow, I could kind of make a janky fling combo with Ram Through and Shadow Spear. Because for those of you who don't know the combo, your end game with a lot of these decks is you have like 15 lands out, you play a Beanstalk Giant, and hopefully if you have enough mana, you can actually, in the same turn, you can resolve the Giant, go to the board, get your flings and your other stuff, and just one-shot your opponent with them. I love it. Have you managed to pull that off yet? Because I actually...
Many times.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I'll get to my run in a minute.
I have not yet actually pulled it off. I ended up thinking it was more jank than anything.
Nah, it's just winner, chicken dinner.
So CGB, is it safe to say then that I, Arjuna Perkins, co-host of the Arena Craft podcast, broke the format?
Yes, I think that
he doesn't
fair.
want to give it to me. He just doesn't want to give it to me.
No, I said yes. What more do you want from me, man? No, I think you were right on this one. I wish you hadn't put a mountain in there and soiled it, but I wish I think this was the call. But I don't think, just from talking to you today, I thought you'd be in here telling me how great Simic Adventures was, but it sounds like you didn't know what you had.
I still think that Temur is the stronger deck overall.
Okay.
Having said that, I have been enjoying playing Simic Adventure on the ladder, and I have won multiple quote-unquote mirror matches where my Simic Adventure beat Temur Adventure. So, however, a lot of those wins came from my opponents just not knowing how to play very well. Or I beat multiple Temur Adventure decks who wished for such fun, spicy, wonderful, useless stuff as Perforos' Intervention.
I've seen that. That's the fling replacement for some people.
Yep, or Sublime Epiphany, which, spoiler alert, just don't. I could go on about this for years and years and years.
I know.
But if you look down CGB's board and my board and most sane boards in these decks, 90% of the sideboard is like 1 or 2 mana cards.
We'll see. I haven't finished yet.
Oh, he hasn't finished yet. Maybe you have like a one-off Ugin as just kind of a save your butt kind of a thing. But like, if you're wishing for all of these extravagant, flashy, expensive, like people used to put mass manipulation in their sideboard, it's not how you're winning with these decks. The sideboard is mostly staying alive, answering your opponent's hard-to-answer threats, dealing with stuff that you can't deal with. You know, we used to have access to good counter magic, which is like RIP. The counter magic is one of the worst parts of this current format. So yeah, don't put that crap in your sideboard. Just like keep it lean and mean. You know, throw 1 or 2 alternate win cons in there and just leave the rest of it for interaction. But I would like to hear what else you had going on.
Sure you would. Sure. After that rant, I'm sure you're going to want to hear this. Return to nature, we've got to blow up clovers. When I play the mirror, I'm only thinking about 2 things almost the whole time when I play against Temur Adventures. I'm thinking about mana advantage and clover advantage. And that's what I try to progress every single turn until the game is over. If I can stay ahead on mana and clover, I should win every time. I barely even care about the board.
Yeah.
Like, you have a Lovestruck Beast, cool. Sorcerer's Spyglass, I have named the Planeswalkers. So the Planeswalkers of this format, they are not great. Like, they're nothing compared to the cards that are leaving with War of the Spark, but they are a lot harder to remove because we just don't have that many ways to deal with them.
Yeah.
And like Basri Ket -6 is really fast. And Garrick just hits you for so much.
Garrick
so
is
Spyglass,
a scary one. Yeah.
Yeah, Spyglass is usually naming those. I have a neutralize because, like you said, the counter magic is at the worst it's been in a long time. like a long time.
Like CGB, if they don't print negate into Zendikar, we are literally not going to have negate in our format. It's kind of scary.
That's happened before. I've lived through this. It's just hard to remember.
Wow, control mages just cry a sad tear there.
All right, the Ugin shouldn't surprise you. Some decks like mono white just can't beat it. They just roll over to it. Once in Future we talked about, but Once in Future is a key part of this next one. I'm curious if you found this one. This is my other combo kill. Sleep.
Sleep? No, I even forgot that Sleep was in this format. I thought it was like an M19 card or something.
I have won a ton of matches because I wish for Sleep and Once in Future and sleep them 2 turns in a row and attack them with 2 Lovestruck Beasts.
That's devious, man. I like that.
Oh, there's a lot of decks that can do nothing about it.
So Sleep is a perfect sideboard inclusion because if you main deck it and you draw it when you're losing, it's the worst card ever. Mm-hmm. But if you cast Sleep while you're ahead or at parity, it's a lot of times the best card in your deck.
100%.
Yeah.
And then the last one, well, no, there's 2 more. One is Radiant Fountain.
Okay, just
the
another
4th Radiant Fountain.
Yep.
Another land. There's been so many times where I just needed one more land to do the thing I need to do. So, and then the last one is Overflowing Insight.
Remind me what that one does?
4 blue, target player draws 7.
Love it.
The finisher.
This is awesome because, you know, I literally sometimes forget the cards that are in the format. These are actually standard playable cards, and I just, you could have fooled me, you know what I mean? So that's really cool, man. That's some pretty sweet tech, I gotta say. And yeah, a lot of people, like in the Teemo list, a lot of players have actually been putting 1 Fabled Passage in the sideboard, which is just a really, really cool idea, right? Because it fixes whichever mana you're short on, basically. And the thing is, you might think like, why would I spend a wish on a land? But actually what happens in these decks is that you have like 2 clovers out and you actually don't know. Like you have one thing that you want to wish for and then the 2 others are like, I don't know what I'm going to get. What am I going to get? And so being able to fetch an extra land is sometimes actually just the best thing that you can do.
Yeah, it's definitely I'm not sure. I might as well take this to make sure I get to cast all my stuff. Because if I have time and I get to cast all my stuff, it seems so inevitable with this deck that you're going to win. It's kind of unbelievable.
I don't know if you've seen this, CGB, but I have multiple times on the ladder where like I have 2 clovers out and I cast and I resolve my granted, and my opponents don't even stick around to find out what I'm getting. You know what I mean? It's just like auto scoop. You're like, oh great, okay, they're gonna get 3 of the best cards in this matchup in their hand right now. I'm just not here for it.
Oh yeah, all the time. And there's a jealousy factor to it. Like, how dare you? How dare you get sideboard cards? This is best of 1. 1!
You can just tell, they're looking at their hand and they're like, bro, I spent this whole game grinding out to get to where I am. And you're just going to frickin' regas in your sideboard? I'm out.
Yep. Off it. I've been on both sides of that multiple times. But this, so I started playing this yesterday, and my week preparing for this format, we could talk a whole cast about this probably, was me playing with all the kind of familiar decks and strategies that I enjoy and getting absolutely dumpstered. I think I started the week around top 50 Mythic. I ended the week around 94%.
Oh, no.
Or no, going into our event, I was at like 94% from trying all this crap and getting destroyed by adventures over and over. And afterwards, like after our event was done, I just grabbed this Simic deck and I started playing. I think I went 29-2,
wow.
And I'm back in the top 100.
Wow.
The 2 losses, one was a Black Devotion list where it was literally like I drew worst possible. I was on the draw and they Agonizing Remorse the Clover out of my hand, and I was left with 2 Beanstalk Giants and lands, and I never drew another spell. So, you know, that is like worst possible. The other loss was something we'll get to, because I want to talk to you about this one. The mono white lifegain deck. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Yep.
But
deck's strong.
Oh my gosh. Just absolutely, as I think the kids call it now, farming the other Teamer Adventure decks with Simic Adventure.
Yeah.
Just every game's the same. We both get a bunch of value. We both do a lot of cool looking things. We both have huge battlefields, and then either they get the double sleep treatment or they get milled out every single time.
So, the funny thing about that is now I definitely, in the game that I played against you, I was definitely just trolling you by getting my mountain and my escape to the wilds from the sideboard. But I actually think that it's a viable thing that you could conceivably do, because sometimes in these matchups, this happens to me multiple times where I'm looking at my opponent's deck and they're on like 30 cards. And I'm like, all I need is another Clover or another Secret Keeper to lock up this game. And so going into the sideboard to get my escape to the wilds is like partially just to dig to find my Secret Keepers. I mean, you have a draw 7 in there, so that kind of does the same thing.
Yeah. You could replace the Radiant Fountain and the Overflowing Insight with Escape to the Wilds and Mountain, and we'd have the same, we have the same plan.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of genius.
Good. Yeah. Good job, man.
Right on. I'll pat myself on the back for that one. I feel proud of that metagame call.
Good job.
So a final thing I wanted to note, and a place where my deck list deviates from yours, is that one of the things I was trying in this Simic list is playing a couple copies of Jolrail as an alternate win con. And I really like Jolrail in this deck for a couple of reasons. One, because the Jolrail Oro combo is just a really strong 2-3 play. The other thing is that you draw so many cards in this deck and you play a lot of dorky creatures. So let's look at a scenario. You have your Secret Keepers and your Edgewall Innkeepers. Let's say you get down a Clover and you poop out a couple of 1/1s, right? And then you start drawing cards with your Innkeeper, and you'll find yourselves with these board states where you have Jolrail, an Innkeeper, 2 or 3 1/1 humans, a couple of Merfolk Secret Keepers on the board, and like a Fae of Wishes. And you have like 6 cards in your hand, and you think like, wow, I could attack all here and be attacking with 50 power worth of creatures if I turn on Jolrail. So that was an alternate thing that I was trying. I don't know if it was good, but it certainly won me games. Like getting to turn your Merfolk Secret Keepers and your dorky 1/1s into even just 4/4s with 4 random cards in your hand can be super strong.
I found I had too many draws that I really wanted to keep, but Jolrail didn't play a part of it.
Yeah,
like the Clover Beanstalk Fae of Wishes hand, right? And you spent your turn 2 on a 2-mana 1/2. I thought I could do better, but I also see that there's a huge upside when the deck is running on the Euro plan, right? So
yeah,
I get it.
Again, I don't know if it's the right call, but it's definitely it's another powerful piece that you can play in the deck, and you do draw a lot of cards in these decks. So I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Moving away from the Simic Adventure deck, I want to talk about the testing process for this format a little bit and my first impressions. So I started from a place where I thought mana is going to be clunky because temples are tapped, Fable Passage is tapped early. I expected things to be slow. So I expected monocolor aggro decks and devotion decks to be very good. Devotion, of course, was huge when it was first introduced with the first Theros. And with the new Theros, those decks haven't really taken off. And before playing the matches, I would have thought red or green to be number 1, black to be around number 3, white maybe to be number 4, blue to be kind of a fun combo, which it is, just too susceptible to Brazen Borrower for my taste. And after actually playing the games, it was kind of surprising. Even though the opposing decks had tapped lands and temples and all these things, the monocolor decks just had too many lame cards.
Yeah, dude.
Most of them.
Yeah,
there wasn't enough synergy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, even the devotion, even if you built in the devotion ones, you're looking at them, these great cards like Embercleave, Demonic Embrace, Garruk and Garruk's Harbinger, all of this looks so bad against Lucky Clover into Brazen Borrower. The game just is over with a well-timed Borrower all the time, and Bonecrusher Giant is such a beating. There was no way to play these decks without feeling like I was running into a brick wall every single game, and oftentimes that wall had a name, and it was Lovestruck Beast. And, we've named 3 cards that are all 4-ofs in these adventure lists, and we didn't even talk about Fae of Wishes, just a 2-mana 1/4 flyer that stops everything. And the only deck I found that was able to overcome this, it wasn't because of the raw stats of the cards, it was because of the synergy, and that was mono white. And you found that as well, but you played it. I did not. A lesser man would do things like blame Twitch chat for leading him astray, but I wouldn't do such a thing. But since you played it, why don't you tell us about our game with mono white, and your impressions of the deck and maybe how you found it.
So all I'm going to say is the force was strong with me in that game. This is literally what happened, CGB, is that we were like 20 minutes away from starting our showdown, and I was short a deck. And I was like, what am I going to play for this showdown? And I was like, I just need something that has a strong proactive game plan, which I know can win a game of Magic, that I don't have to feel embarrassed sleeving up here. And I was just thinking back on my experience of testing on the ladder, and I was like, you know which deck has just kind of ranched me a bunch of times in this format? Is frickin' mono white aggro devotion. Let's just sleeve it up. And I literally put down every card that I'd remembered seeing these decks play that was good. Did a couple, a little meta gaming, cut down a couple of, like you don't want to run Ford Linden's Steadfast Queen, right? So I cut a couple of those. But it was just, I crapped the deck list out. I mean, I really didn't put any work into it. And then I sleeved it up for our game 2, and I basically got probably the god drawiest of ever possible god draw games with this deck. So this is basically how it went. Turn 1, Speaker for the Heavens. Turn 2, 2 more Speaker for the Heavens. So on turn 2, we have 3 of these guys.
This is on the play.
This is on the play, yeah. And you didn't seem to have a particularly strong hand either.
I didn't play any cards. I played 1 land, and then I played a tap land, and then I scooped, but whatever, go on.
So turn 3, we have three viable attackers. Turn 3, I resolve Linden, the Steadfast Queen. Swing with my 3 Speaker for the Heavens, which are all lifelinkers, by the way. Gain 3 life when they connect. So I'm at 26 life. We're already 1 point short of turning on the Speaker for the Heavens on turn 3. So basically, we pass back to CGB, and it's like, unless he has Flaming Volley or whatever,
Blazing Volley,
unless he has literally main decking Blazing Volley in his deck, this game is over. It's just impossible.
No, you didn't. You weren't done there. You had to play like a selfless savior. So you did. I couldn't even like trade or kill one of your speakers. So you were getting 3 angels.
Yeah. So
end of story.
So the upshot of this is that I swung out on turn 4, and at the end of the combat, I still had 3 Speaker for the Heavens. I made 3 Sarah Angels, passed the turn to CGB, and that was that.
I don't remember a turn. I'm pretty sure I was already on to the next game. It was destructive.
It was. So, and actually, Speaker for the Heavens is really the card, in my opinion, which gives you an incentive to still want to play this deck. It's actually a very, very, very strong card, and a card that I kept losing to on the ladder. In this deck, they run 4 of the Selfless Savior, and they run 4 of the Alcid of Life's Bounty. And like, if you cannot get that thing off the battlefield, they gain the life, man. Like, they get that. Unless you are just totally demolishing them, they get up to 27 life, and they start crapping out those angels, and it's really, really hard to keep up with that. Yeah, I ended up walking away thinking that mono-white life gain deck was actually the best monocolor deck in the format. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes. And I don't think it's very close. Speaker of the Heavens is kind of a win more card in that deck, but it needs to. Mm-hmm. Like, it needs to win more. Yeah. That's what it takes in this format, and it's a 1-mana play that, if it gets Brazen Borrowed, is not embarrassing. And if they Brazen Borrow the Angel, it's not embarrassing. You just make another. So I think that has a lot to do with the success of that particular deck, and I think it needs it. I am curious, did you find Hallowed Priest?
Well, okay, I didn't find it, but an opponent found it, and I ran it in my deck. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
How about, did you have Basri Ket in your deck?
No.
I found that I don't run a lot, just 2, but in the games where your speaker is brickwalled and you don't have another life gain source, sometimes you're just not gaining the life.
Yeah.
If you have Basri, you can attack with the Indestructible, and it keeps gaining more every turn. It really is very hard for the opponent to deal with it if they couldn't kill it before. It's actually a lot better than I thought it would be.
Okay, that's a really cool idea. For me, I just went on 2 Lindens and 3 Heliod's, and I think that was the only 3 drops I was running in the deck.
No Luris either?
No, you're right. I did run 2 Luris. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think Luris with the saviors and the bounties is just...
No, you're right.
And the speaker, of course. It's such a plan B.
Yeah, and it has lifelink, right? So that's really nice. Yeah, so yeah, Luris definitely forgot that one, but I was running it. And I was also running 2 copies of 4-mana Elspeth Planeswalker.
Yeah, I had that too.
Right, because she can just hit that life gain. So the deck runs plenty of good cards. It does run some kind of janky win more cards like Speaker. But I mean, dude, you can high roll so hard with this deck.
Really? I wouldn't know. Must be nice.
This deck has some of the most busted openings in the format, I think. So, and I was just getting ranched. I was getting totally ranched. And that the priest that we're talking about is what's the name again? The Ajani's Pridemate replacement.
It's called Hallowed Priest, and it's a 2-mana 1/1 that whenever you gain life, you put a counter on it. It's a human cleric. So strictly worse Pridemate, but
still
it doesn't really matter.
God.
Yeah. When did you ever need your Pridemate to be 1 more? Never.
Yeah. There are some maybe edge cases, like for example, you want to play it on turn 2 and you're worried your opponent has a Bone Crusher or something. But yeah, you can easily maneuver the game state to where you play this and then immediately just gain it up to be like a 3/3 or a 4/4. So yeah, still worth playing, y'all. Put it in your deck if you're playing this archetype.
This is a deck that if your opponent hits tap land, you can do some absolutely disgusting things and they can't recover from it. Every other deck, it's like, I mean, unless you play 3 Fervent Champions, they can probably recover. And even then, they might recover. Like, the other decks can't really they can't come out and just take over like this.
No. And here's another thing, my opinion as well, and maybe this transitions into one of the deck lists you played, CGB, but my opinion is this is not a great format for Elspeth Conquers Death. And I think that, Heliod, basically the only card that Heliod worries about is Elspeth Conquers Death. So in a lot of cases, like if you get the Heliod down, he's just going to take over the game.
Dude, they awaken the monster. This is what you are like in a format without Elspeth Conquers Death, dude. You're just smashing it.
That's all it took, buddy. That's all it took.
My blue-white control list only had 1 copy of Elspeth Conquers Death in it, which gave people a lot of like, huh? What the hell are you doing? And it was like, the good decks, it's terrible against them. Now, the version I ended up laddering with and making a video with has 4 because I started playing against a bunch of really weird brews and I needed it. But the good decks, like, it's terrible against them.
So this blue-white deck, it was a Yorion deck, right?
Yes.
Because I was looking down the list of cards and I was like, look, Yorion is clearly a power level card in the format, so worth trying. But after my testing, I ended up not liking it. But, you're definitely a much more experienced Azorious mage than I am. So what did you end up thinking about this deck?
This deck is such a beautiful, wonderful... they call it Chasing the Dragon in my chat.
Okay. It's a white whale kind of a thing.
Let's just say we ended up at 95% and it was mostly this deck. We went from Mythic top 100 to 95% with mostly this deck. So the good way to play, Yorion has a ceiling on it named Ugin. It can't really beat that card if it resolves. It has a floor under it called Edgewall, Innkeeper, and Lucky Clover, and it can't really beat those cards if they stay in play. If it can get around those issues, it has this middle game where it can do this dominant thing where you accumulate some value with this piece, that piece, that piece, and then you blink it all. Because of Innkeeper and because of Clover, I ended up playing 4 Banishing Lights. I ended up playing 4 Glass Caskets. Because my Yorion needed to draw a ton of cards to be relevant, I had Golden Egg, also because my freaking mana was terrible. I wanted to play Neutralize and Shatter the Sky, so I had Golden Egg in my 80-card deck.
Surprisingly hard to hit reliably in a 2-mana 2-color mana base in this format.
Oh, yeah. And because if you go tap land, you're probably dead. So you needed a critical mass of basics and castles, but you also needed double blue on 3 and double white on 4.
And double white on 4. That was the issue I ran into, man.
Hard to do.
It was like actually resolving Shatter on 4 was so much harder than I thought it was going to be.
And in general, I found a lot of my 2 and 3 color decks needed golden eggs if they weren't playing like Beanstalk Giant or Cultivate. So there's a tip if you're having trouble curving out. Run more basics and run some golden egg. Still, like, you can do all this work, and in the end, you're probably not getting very far ahead. I didn't play blue-white because I thought it was an amazing deck. I just thought I could beat your mono-green list, which apparently... Nope, chicken. Nope.
The mono green I ended up not sleeving up for the event.
That's the one. I should have let you keep cycling just because I had a pretty good matchup with cycling, and it was terrible until I found the Soul Guide Lanterns, which basically shut down Kroxa Uro cycling, and they're a pretty good fit for that deck. So I thought the matchup with cycling went from terrible to very good. I should have just let you keep it, but wah. Actually, I was going to, but wah. And so on. Or manipulation, however you want to look at it. But yeah, blue-white, I recommend it for fun. I don't recommend it for rank, profit, tournament, anything of that nature. And the counter spells have to get better, and the answers to Clover have to get better before I'd consider it.
Mm-hmm. This was the issue I ran into. It was the deck just ended up feeling a bit too slow, a bit too clunky. And it just felt like I didn't quite have the answers I needed.
I felt like I worked out the clunk, but the answers are just, they don't exist, really.
Yeah.
There's no 1 or 2 mana destroy target Innkeeper or Clover, because you don't know which one you're going to play against.
I had a hard time figuring out exactly why it wasn't working for me, because I felt like I was playing a deck list that was very similar to like top tier kind of normal standard decks, right? Decks that you would see on the normal standard ladder. I felt like I was making very little modification to known good decks, and they just weren't quite keeping up. So I don't know if it was just a metagame thing, or maybe these decks get a lot more, or used to, or I guess I should say still do get a lot more in the sideboard with their actual good cards that are still in standard. I don't know about you, CGB, but I found that we are losing a lot of really good sideboard cards with this rotation.
Which is funny because we were preparing for a best of one. But yes, it is absolutely true. There's a lot of... The Color Hoser sideboard cards are pretty much gone except for Mystical Dispute.
Right. It did not perform well for me. I will have you know that I actually tested with a CGB Troll deck, which was basically just your deck that you beat me with in the showcase. The Nyambi... Barin, kind of infinite loopy. I actually thought that a deck like that could be viable in the format, but nah.
It had the same problems with Ugin and didn't have the answers to the other things. Otherwise, I would have played that deck, but it was even worse against Innkeeper and Clover. Because, I mean, I bounce my Barin. Like, what does that even do? What did you actually do with your time? Okay.
Yeah, and bouncing adventure creatures is not where you want to be in life.
No. Not even.
So... let's talk about cycling, because I think you and I both identified that was a strong strategy in the format. It basically loses nothing, and it's just still as fast and nasty and capable of killing you quickly as it ever was. So do we have any particular insight into that deck list, or is it just kind of a, Burrow cycling was good, it's still good, the end kind of a thing?
Kind of a quick big picture thing, and kind of why I can say I don't really like this format, if you don't mind me soapboxing for a minute.
Yeah, lay it on us.
I'm Magic Boomer, and Magic Boomer man wants to play decks that can be categorized as color and theme, like blue, white, control. Like, that is how I would classify it. Boomer Magic Man me does not want to play a deck that can be summarized as color and 1-block mechanic. Okay. Teamer, adventure. Boros, cycling. Simic, mutate. I want a minute for Simic Mutate too when we get to it. But this, like, these decks are very one-dimensional. They're basically take the cards that have the keyword that are good, throw them into a deck, and you can play. And they're very beginner-friendly, and they're usually budget-friendly. So they have good things going for them. But for me, they do the same thing every game, and I am bored, both playing against them and playing with them. That said, the cycling thing is very strong. If you can't exile their graveyard or interact with the stack, the Zenith Flare will kill you. It's that straightforward. It's that simple. Every game plays out almost the same. The only variation is whether or not there's a giant fox attacking you while this happens or not. You know what I mean? So the deck is very, very good. A lot of people are playing it. It's going to continue to be good. As long as people don't respect the graveyard or have a plan for it. It's definitely better in best of one because a lot of decks can't compete with it because they didn't respect it when they were being built. So that's my take on cycling. How about you?
I'm with you. You know, the thing that I don't like about cycling is just that they made it as competitive as it is. I thought the Gates deck was a really good example of like a budget-friendly, competitive enough deck. A deck that you could play into, I don't know, Diamond maybe. Maybe you could even get to Mythic if you really played it right. I thought that was a great power level to have your like beginner-friendly, mostly uncommons kind of a deck. And the thing that bothers me about the cycling deck is just that it's a little bit too good. I'm fine having a deck like that in the format, but it just annoys me that that's a totally Mythic capable, like, destroy your actually good deck capable deck. I don't know. I just feel like they cranked it a little too hard on that one. So that's my main beef. But I totally agree. Like when I was looking at this format, and I think you were doing the same thing, just going down the list of what's the busted block mechanic in this set? What's the busted block mechanic in this set?
Yeah. Ikoria with cycling and mutate, and Eldraine with adventure pretty much provided a deck in a box. You know, you just search for your keyword and you pick out the cards from that keyword that don't suck, and you have a deck.
Exactly. Well, okay, so we basically came down on mono green didn't seem good, mono red didn't seem good. I think mostly with those decks, it was just that they lose too many good cards, right? They lose the Pelt Collectors of the world. They lose the Vivians of the world. They lose Runaway Steamkin. They lose Light Up the State. Some of them are powerhousey plays, and some of the better cheap plays as well. I think that's one of the
all
reasons
the good
they struggled.
Cheap plays. Yeah.
Because it's like those decks kept the top end, right? They kept the Questing Beasts of the world. They kept the Embercleaves of the world. They kept the Torbrands. All that, like 3 CMC and up, we're good to go. But 1 and 2, which is where aggro decks live, man. Like you need your 1s and your 2s to hit really hard. And they just got gutted, basically.
My mono green deck that I ended with and thought about playing, it's really funny. It kind of has 1-drops because it runs Stonecoil Serpent and it runs Lovestruck Beast. But like the curve, if you look at the curve on paper, it's hilarious. It says I have 4 1-drops, and I think that's counting Stonecoil Serpent. And it says I have 7 2-drops, which is like Scavenging Ooze and Ram Through, which isn't a 2-drop. And then it has like 10 3-drops and 12 4-drops. Like it's an opposite curve. It's literally going up instead of
It's
down.
It's going in the wrong direction.
Because there just weren't good cards to play, and I needed power to beat what I was up against. It's kind of it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So give those decks a miss. We're gonna just have to get better stuff to be doing. And Zendikar, maybe will provide that for us.
It better.
So maybe we can just kind of quickly go through a bunch of other ideas that we brought and or messed around with. I actually saw you playing with a list I was hoping you would bring to our showcase, but maybe it wasn't good enough. You were playing a Temur adventure list focused around the Genesis Ultimatum. Did that end up just being a meme?
That is a pretty good deck, and just to let you know, it's almost all the adventure. It's like an adventure package with 4 Terror of the Peaks and 4 Genesis Ultimatums, taking out the Fae of Wishes strategy, and what was the Flex Spots, and I think there was something else that I wasn't
running
playing.
Cultivate to just power out a bunch of mana.
Yeah, Cultivate and Beanstalk Giant. I don't think I had Clovers, actually. I think I took out the Clovers.
Did you play the Innkeepers or not?
I think it had Innkeeper.
Okay.
but I'm not positive. It's hard to remember now, but yeah, basically the idea was to cast Genesis Ultimatum 1 or 2 times, hitting Terror of the Peaks and Beanstalk Giant, which was
pretty
an insane
sweet combo.
Oh, it was sweet. It was insanely over the top. It did nothing for so much of the game, though.
Oh no.
Just no good early plays, no good 2-mana ramp. You had to start ramping on 3, which is a lot worse than 2. So you're giving up so many turns. You're basically giving your opponent 4 uncontested turns if you're on the draw. And if you just tap out and cast Terror and they do anything to it on turn 5, like the game's basically over. Too many fail states. In a nutshell, it had too many fail states, but it was a very funny deck. I had moments where I would like cast the ultimatum and I would hit Terror and 2 Beanstalk Giants and 2 lands and dome the opponent for 30 out of nowhere.
Glory. Yeah, it's a cool use of Beanstalk Giant, right? Because it ramps you towards the ultimatum and then it finishes with the Terror. So I thought that was some cool tech there. Other things that I tried, I did try Simic Mutate. I'll tell you what, it did some work against me on the ladder, but I ended up running into the same issues I always did with that deck, which was basically just that consistency was an issue sometimes, and it was really, really weak to removal and wraths and stuff. So,
can I ask you about a card? Did you find Simic Mutate with 4 Ranger's Guile?
I did not play Ranger's Guile. A thing that I liked, which had been played in some number in previous lists, was Unsummon. Not only a way for you to blank an opponent's removal spell, but to rebuy all of your mutate triggers. I definitely lost to that card a couple of times.
I started with the Unsummons, but once I got into Ranger's Guile Mutate, it was like I built my own Paradise Druid and I just kept protecting it. It was kind of amazing, plus you can be attacking. So it was like this strange beatdown deck where you're building one threat and then trying to find a Ranger's Guile to protect it every turn.
It's kind of like a Boggle strategy, right?
The reason it worked good is because the opponent could have 2 Clovers and a Brazen Borrower, and Ranger's Guile, if you only have 1 creature in play, just counters the stack of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they lose that that Borrower, so that's nice.
Yeah, and that deck was good. Like, it needed Scavenging Ooze. Like, it had 2 Scavenging Ooze for the cycling matchup, so you could get that out and exile the cyclers from their graveyard so Flare didn't kill you, because otherwise that matchup's terrible. It got to run 4 Gem Raisers, though.
Gem Razor is a strong card in this format. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Putting the Clover down. Also, all those randomly enchantment creatures that just lurk around. They take a beat.
If you get to Gem Razor and Anax, it's one of the best feelings in the entire world.
And obviously Mutate is the best home for it. I thought it would be mono green because of standard, but Mutate, you get the Mutate triggers of other things and you get to wreck their stuff every turn. It's
nightmare for some decks.
But the hard part with it was ending the game, and I started with like a Thassa's Oracle Thassa thing so I could just deck myself and win. But that was it was just terrible if you actually drew them, and there were so many things that could go wrong. Like we were talking about Brazen Borrower, right? Like it's in everything. So I ended up with a Kiora Best the Sea God for the sleep effect.
Tech.
Oh, yeah. For the sleep effect, and an Ugin to exile all the small things and get through with the big things. But the deck is good.
CGB, I'm so glad to hear you running one main deck copies of Ugin. I can't tell you how many decks on the ladder in this particular format I see people just running too many frickin' Ugins. It's like, get these Ugins out of your deck. What are you doing? What are you doing? I was playing against this. It was like a Golgari. It was some kind of dirtly like Golgari life, or maybe it was an Orzhov life drain deck. No ramp, no nothing. I got to this place where I was in a good board state. I was crushing them, and they just slam an Ugin from nowhere. And I'm like, what is this doing in your deck? What is this doing? Like, I was so tilting. And the most tilting thing was that it won them the game.
Oh, I was going to say, you wouldn't be upset in this story if you had just proceeded to thrash them.
So, like, the fact that they were doing it, like, this is the worst thing in Magic, right? Is when someone does something, when it's wrong, when it works, and you lose. Worst feeling ever.
I think if they throw in the GG, it's a little worse.
And they BM you, yeah. Yeah. But But yeah, people are just running too many Ugins, dude. It's like, cool, run one in your mutate deck to randomly hit it. Sounds great. People are running like 2 or 3 copies, and it is wrong. I'm gonna put it out there. It is wrong. Don't do it.
You're more into the one of Kiora Best the Sea God than the 2 Ugins.
Oh, well, okay. Here's the thing. I actually don't even love Ugin in this deck list, right? Because how's Ugin furthering your plan? The whole point of this deck is that you're flooding the board with creatures. The plan A of this deck is that you want to get Auspicious Starix and then mutate another Auspicious Starix onto it and just put your entire deck onto the battlefield. So, like, what part of Ugin plays into that plan?
I think we're on the same page, because I think the player that you're kind of preaching to here is the one who says, well, it's an amazing card, so I'm going to hit Ugin. It's like that's the best thing to be doing. But they don't really think about what they're going to do with the Ugin. For me, the Ugin has a very clear role. The mutate raises the casting cost of all these cards. Like a mutated creature like a Sterix has a 5 casting cost minimum. Ugin is there to wipe out all the small stuff that would block.
Just like the dorky chumpers and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to get Ugin. I'm going to minus for like 2 or 3. And then my larger mutate creatures get to hit the opponent and win. In a way, it's like the Kiora Best the Sea God, right? Which is going to tap their stuff. But it does it the next, like Kiora does it the next turn. So this deck isn't a one-shot kill most of the time. This deck is I'm going to get way ahead on board with a threat you can't remove because I have hexproof from the Ranger's Guile, and I'm just going to clear the way. And I'm going to clear it over 2 turns. I'm going to clear it with Ugin 1 turn and Kiora the next turn.
Which is, no, that's gas.
Yeah, it's a
I
plan.
totally hear that.
Like, that's the thing, though. It's a plan. Most people are like, Ugin, it's mythic, it's Ugin, it's in my deck. 3 copies.
You know, and we don't have to go into this because, you know, I don't want to just talk about Adventure the whole thing, but it's kind of the same reason I complain about people running Nissa in their Adventure decks. CGB, I noticed that neither you nor I seem to be running Nissa in any of our Adventure decks. Brad Nelson is an advocate of it. It seems like good players are doing it in the regular standard version. So clearly, you know, I'm not going to argue with people who are much better at the game than I'm ever going to be. But it just seems so off-plan to me. What does Nissa do for your Adventure deck? She doesn't get you card advantage. The deck already has mana advantage. The deck already has really hard-hitting 5-mana plays with Escape to the Wilds and stuff. Like, what's she doing in the deck?
It's the other plan. I tell people all the time to put Nissa into their decks that they send me for advice, because their deck just needs something else. If your you don't want to play cycling in every format, where we throw our deck at the opponent. If they can't answer it, we win. So in Adventures, I can see how some people think it's a one plan kind of thing, where the whole deck kind of achieves one goal. The good news about Adventures is that the whole deck actually achieves a very flexible goal anyway, and it has a whole sideboard of ideas. So I never feel like I'm playing a one-note deck with Adventure. Every deck feels kind of different because there's so many options. But I get where the Nissa is coming from. It's the other plan. It's here's the thing that you can't quite answer. And I will say this, if you're worried about a mirror, the deck doesn't have the easiest time answering Nissa. So if one player has a Nissa and the other doesn't, then they have to stop what they're doing, which is basically the complete accumulation of value, clovers, and lands. The clover advantage, mana advantage, I talked about it. The player who has the Nissa forces the other player to stop that plan for a minute and do something about Nissa. So I think that's the best argument I can make.
It's so interesting because I felt consistently in the mirror that the player who resolved Nissa, who took the turn off to resolve Nissa, usually lost. And it was because you spent 5 mana to resolve a Planeswalker that made one creature that doesn't matter in this matchup. And I spend 5 mana to basically draw 5 cards. Maybe it's just because I have been playing decks that, if I'm playing the mirror, for example, like Nissa is not a problem for me. I can just bounce it. You know what I mean? I can just bone crush it to death. So maybe it's just that it plays well against a number of other matchups that might need kind of a get out of jail free card.
I would guess, though, that they're probably doing it wrong if they play it on 5, right? I mean,
yeah,
isn't
it could be. The people are just, Mm-hmm.
You want to play it when you can use the mana advantage, like now.
Yeah,
like right now.
That's true. Like, I think playing Nissa into a board with like 10 plus mana and then having Fae in hand and stuff, like you could definitely just go off.
Yeah. I see a twinkle entering your eye just for a second as you think about that.
So maybe I could even run one in the sideboard. I remember Brad saying that he was running one in the sideboard. So maybe that's where I could. But I just I don't know, don't compromise your main plan to run it. Anyway, all right, let's move on. What other decks do you want to talk about in this format, CGB?
I'm going to give a list. You can tell me what you think. I think the best deck is Simic Adventures. Do you agree or disagree?
I think one of the adventures, whether it's Temur or Simic, I actually haven't decided myself on that.
I think it's the best meta deck because I think it just hits the meta so perfectly. I think the best overall deck is Temur Adventures. I think that the best creature deck is actually the mutate deck. I really do.
Okay.
I think that if you want to play creatures in this format, if you're just kind of the green mage, I think that's your jam. Because the creatures do so much. If
you were previously the mono green dude, then you should now be the mutate dude. I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. I think the best combo deck is cycling.
Yeah, bar none. Far and away.
And it really doesn't matter much what your early game is. Beating them down with a Fox or a Stinger is great, but just the double flare. You're just trying to double flare them before they interact with your graveyard. And yeah, I think the best aggro deck is, we talked about it, mono white. And I don't think anything else is really close. I can't think of a single other deck I played that is in the ballpark. You might ask once again, why did I play blue-white control and blue devotion, and is it tempo? And the answer to all that is I have poor taste and has nothing to do with my Twitch chat.
Well, the is it one you only played because I have poor taste. So there you go. Oh, the irony of you ending up playing that deck. You're a brave soul, CGB, and I appreciate that about you.
I treasure that about myself. Thank you.
Yep. One deck we didn't hit that I did want to touch on briefly was I actually thought Golgari Adventure could have a home in this format, and was just roundly disappointed in that deck. Could not hang with the other adventure decks. Couldn't really hang with the aggro decks. This is what I felt about Golgari Adventure, was that I was doing a bunch of stuff and none of it mattered. I was just I drew a bunch of cards, and the cards I drew sucked, right? I was I'm looking at this hand of 7 cards that just suck. I was playing that, what's the Reaper of Night or something? Reaper of the Night, yes. Reaper of the Night. So I was playing this deck, and the idea is that you copy the Reaper Adventure, and you make your opponent discard 4 to 6 to 1,000,000 cards. And I remember this game where I got the turn 4 Reaper of Night, opponent discards 4 cards, and I was sweet, I just won the game. The opponent had 1 card left in hand. They trounced me. Yep. I was going to ask. They trounced me. I was bro, if I make you discard 4 cards and I still lose, this deck is heinous. So yeah, don't try Golgari Adventure. Agreed. I can relate to that story so much. Did your Troll King deck go anywhere, or was that mostly just kind of a meme? I'm pretty sure that chat wanted that deck because we had a game where I brought back the Troll King on turn 3 and played a Great Henge. Oh, nice. On turn 3. Yeah, it was okay. It was a good turn. Didn't turn out to be a very good deck. Oh, the other deck. Okay, so one of the things I brought to our showdown was Simic Epiphany, and it was just a version of a deck I'd played to Mythic on Ladder a little while ago. And it was just Jol Rails, Oros, Teferi Master of Time, Gargaroth, Sublime Epiphany, kind of fill in the blanks around that shell. I don't actually think that deck's good. It's like a pile, It's a Simic pile deck. You play strong cards. If your opponent can't answer your Gargaroth, you win. Or if your opponent can't answer your Jol Rail, you win. If your opponent can't answer your Oro, you win. Nothing about the deck is abjectly weak, but it's just not actually a plan. It's just a pile of cards. So that ended up being my thought about that. I found Epiphany to be really bad against Adventure because what can you really do to it? If they have a Clover, Innkeeper, and some Adventure creatures, what does your Epiphany even do? That was my experience with the card. It's a win-more card. I mean, let's be real about it. I can see why, for example, the Temur Reclamation decks were playing 1 or 2 copies because they have a billion mana, right? And so if you have that much mana, and especially that much mana untapped that you can afford to have untapped, because that's the entire game plan of your deck, is having 1,000,000 untapped mana, then great. Play the best counterspell in the format, which is obviously that card. But other than that, in my tap-out deck, no way. Yeah, not for this format.
So I think we've talked a lot about the 2021. We've made our recommendations. We've talked about the best deck of different types. I'm pretty sure that covers it very well. Are you feeling optimistic about the future of Standard after playing kind of a future Standard type of format for a week?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. My first gut response is this format is missing a lot of cards. A 4-set standard is just a very narrow standard, and this with Zendikar it's going to be a 5-set standard, which is still going to be fairly narrow. We've been kind of glutted on this 8-set standard for a long time, so we've gotten used to being able to throw together a respectable deck in just about any archetype. There were definitely forerunners in every metagame that somewhat invalidated certain archetypes. But you could always build a decent aggro deck. You could always build a decent control deck. You could build a decent combo deck. Whichever archetype you wanted, you could kind of put it together. And one of the things I'm feeling right now is we're going to need a lot of support if we want to be able to play aggro, control, combo, mid-range, all of this stuff in the format. We're just missing, we don't have a negate. We don't have a really good red 1-drop aggressive creature. We don't have this, we don't have that. The lands need to be better. The power is there. We have power. We have finishers. We have build-arounds. We have good expensive spells. We still have some, reasonable ramp ideas. So there are like shells that are kind of still there. But I feel like the glue is missing. So I feel like Zendikar is going to need to provide a heck of a lot of glue. I almost feel like the meal has the main dish, but it's missing the carbohydrate. It's missing just like that kind of thing that just fills it in and actually makes the dinner satisfying. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about it right now. How does that measure up with your thoughts?
We make fun of potato. We call cards potato, but God darn it, man, do we need some potatoes.
Yeah, dude.
We need some potatoes in this format, because here's the way that I would like. I want to try to summarize it with throwing a question to you, because I think you'll have a similar opinion to me. If there was a Pro Tour played in this format, what percentage of the field would have Edgewall Innkeeper?
Yeah, I mean, it would just be redonkulous. 80%. 80%.
Yeah, I agree. There just wasn't that much that could beat it. You'd have a few people try the lifegain deck. I think nobody would play cycling. It's way too easy to beat after sideboarding. It just can't plan B. It just can't. And I think mutate, there might be some crazies trying that. I bet there's a way to beat it that wasn't explored, because I didn't really care about trying to beat it, quite honestly. But yeah, I think that Lucky Clover and Edgewall Innkeeper would be in the range of 80% of that format. And I think that's messed up. So it just goes to show how the card advantage engines are just too cheap and too free. And it's still Eldraine, man. It's still Eldraine.
Oh, it's Eldraine. And it never stopped being Eldraine, my friend.
It always has been.
What a set, dude. What a set. It might be the most powerful Magic set ever printed.
By the time we get to next week, or maybe there's one more week after it, I always forget, but we're really close to getting previews. And pretty much every preview I'm going to be looking at is like, can we attack a freaking adventure deck with this? That's the most important thing to me. And I think that's where the format starts and ends.
I'm with you. And, I mean, let's give Magic players credit. Like, a lot of people have been looking to adventure as the biggest winner of rotation, because it is like you were saying, it's kind of like the most powerful single block synergy that we have in Standard right now. And so that's a natural place to look for a deck that's going to be mostly unbroken with rotation. So, okay, if you want to play Standard competitively for the rest of this month and just moving forward, I think that you are safe to invest in Adventure, period. Bone Crusher is just going to be in this format until it rotates. Borrower is going to be good in this format till it rotates. Lovestruck Beast, is probably the one of those three that may fall off, but probably not. It's probably just still not one of the safest crafts you can make. These cards are just good. Like, okay, Escape to the Wilds, So if you're feeling worried about that, then make the Simic deck. Because I'll tell you what, Oro's not going anywhere.
Nope, that's a safe one.
So yeah, I actually think, I'm glad that you highlighted this deck so much, because talk about a rotation-proof strategy. Even if the strategy falls apart, all of the cards in the deck are fine to invest in. They're great cards. Zendikar is really going to need to shake things up. I'd like to see Zendikar make aggro good again. If aggro is not good, I think that this upcoming format's going to suck.
I am concerned. I share concern that it's kind of a one-note adventure into adventures format, and I'm scared.
Yeah, it's either going to be an adventure format, or it's just going to be some other kind of cultivate Oro ramp nonsense thing, which is already so enabled and standard that everyone's sick of, right? So we need to rein it back on these mid-range value, eventually go over the top piles. And I just feel like we need a good aggro deck. We need a good control deck. We need these foundational aspects of Magic that keep the game diverse. And we just haven't had that for a long time. Straight up control. Okay, sure, Gabriel Nassif can still win a tournament, but your average pleb just can't really get there with control for months and months and months now. So that's what I would like to see.
Agreed. And of course, I'm Covertgoblue. You don't have to ask too much more. You're speaking my language.
Well, CGB, thanks so much for putting your heads together with me. And I think we broke the format. I think probably in one of these next episodes, we're probably just going to do a rotation primer.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, if you're excited about standard content, basically for the next couple of months, we're just going to be churning out the standard because there's going to be a lot to talk about. So definitely tune in, check it out. We're going to be talking about all the standard related stuff that you guys want to hear about. All right, that's going to cover it for the show. Thank you so much for joining us for another week of the Arena Craft podcast. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're also on Spotify. We're also on YouTube. Have been releasing some more YouTube content. Also, just reached monetization and community level status on the YouTube channel. So thank you all so much if you're listening to this on YouTube, supporting on YouTube. We deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate you. Keep leaving comments, keep subscribing. It's kind of blowing up. So thank you guys so much. You can also join the ArenaCraft Discord. It's a really excellent place to see deck lists, get more information about the show, etc. Also, as a result of the featured streaming and CGB's help, etc., the Twitch channel is kind of moving along and blowing up as well. Had a lot of engagement there lately. So come say hi. And I'm going to be working on getting a regular streaming schedule together here very, very soon. So I'm excited to continue to work on that and make that a thing that you can do.
So follow ArenaCraft Podcast on Twitch. It's a thing, man. It's happening. And also that monetization on YouTube requires 1,000 subscribers, and I think it's 3,000 or 4,000 watch minutes. So the people are behind it. Great job, man.
It's happening. Thank you, listeners, and thank you, CGB. Speaking of CGB, you can find his content on YouTube as well. Man's been crushing it for forever. And you can also find him on Twitch. He streams Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Always a good time. All right, CGB, I am super stoked to catch up with you next week. Have a good one.
You too. Later.